I used to work the night shift at an advanced auto parts store. It wasn't a job for most people would jump at, but it paid well, and the nights were usually quiet, at least, until that one night. It was a little after 2 a.m., maybe around 3 a.m. or 2:50, and I was the only one on duty. My buddy Marcus left the store because he said he had to go home to get some shut-eye. We didn't get many customers at that hour, so I usually spent most of my shift stocking shelves, organizing inventory, and maybe catching up on some reading. That night, everything was still and dead, silent, except for some soft hum of of the lights and flickering, etc. I was halfway through restocking the oil filters when the automatic door slid open with a mechanical hiss. My head snapped and I squinted toward the entrance. A man had walked in. He was wearing black sweater, black winter hat, black gloves, black jeans, and black boots. This is kind of weird because it's still August near me and it's pretty hot in my area. But something about him was off right from the start. He was tall, wearing a long coat that seemed too heavy, like I said, with a black winter hat, etc. His movements were stiff, almost unnatural, like he was forcing himself to walk in slow motion. He stood near the entrance for a moment, just staring at the wall. I offered the usual greeting, trying to sound friendly, but he didn't respond, didn't even look in my direction. Instead, he walked toward the back of the store with his footsteps echoing in the empty space. I tried to brush it off like usual customers do, like they just walk around and look for their stuff. Maybe he was just someone passing through, needing a part of a tool a tool. But as I kept an eye on him, I noticed he wasn't looking for any of the shelves. He just wandered aimlessly, his eyes scanning the ceilings and corners like he was searching for something or someone. After a few minutes, I started getting uneasy. It wasn't uncommon to get weirdos late at night, but this guy wasn't browsing like a normal customer would. I decided to approach him and ask him if he needed help. As I got closer, the hairs on the back of my neck stood up. He smelled faintly of something sour and metal, like rust mixed with rotting. When I finally got within a few feet of him, I forced a smile. "Can I help you find something?" He didn't answer right away. He just turned slowly to face me. That's when I got a good look at his face. His skin was pale and waxy like a mannequin, and those eyes were empty, hollow, like he was looking right through me. He finally spoke in his low voice, gravelly whisper, "I'm looking for something specific." I nodded, trying to keep my cool. "Sure, what is it?" I can point you in the right direction." He leaned closer, way too close for comfort. I could feel the cold radiating off him. "Do you have anything that can fix what's broken?" My gut twisted. The way he said it didn't sound like he was talking about car parts. There was something sinister in his tone, something that made my blood run cold. I took a step back and forced a chuckle, trying to lighten the mood. "Well, we've got all kinds of tools and parts, but it depends on what's broken. Engine, battery, brakes." He didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small rusted wrench that kind of looked like it hadn't been used in decades. The metal was stained dark, almost like it had been dipped in something that dried and, He held it out to me, his hand shaking slightly. He then spoke in a low voice. This needs fixing, but it's not just a tool I need." I didn't know what to say. My instincts were screaming at me to get out of there. But I was stuck alone, and with the guy who clearly wasn't all there. I glanced toward the front of the store, considering just walking away and calling security. But then the man did something that made my heart skip a beat. He tilted his head back just enough for me to see under the brim of his hat. His eyes weren't just hollow, they were sunken, like he hadn't slept in days. But worse than that, his pupils were unnaturally large, almost like black voids, swallowing the whites of his eyes. He grinned, revealing teeth stained yellow and brown like they'd never seen a toothbrush. And then he said to me, I think you might be what I need. He rasped. I stepped back, but before I could say anything, the store lights flickered and went out, plugging everything into darkness. I stood frozen, barely breathing, listening to the silence. Then I heard it. The sound of something scraping against metal, followed by slow, deliberate footsteps coming closer. I fumbled for my phone, trying to get some light, but my hands were shaking too much. Finally, the screen lit up, casting a dim glow around me. I pointed it toward where the man had been standing, but he was gone. I swung my light around in panic, but the aisles were completely empty. The only sound was the distant hum of the backup generator kicking in. The lights flickered back on, and the store was suddenly bright again, but the man was nowhere to be seen. The wrench he held was lying on the floor, rusty and caked with something dark that I didn't want to identify. I ran to the front, locked the doors, and called my manager, telling him what happened. We checked the security cameras the next day, but the only slowed static during the time was the man was in the store. No record of him entering or leaving. I don't know what the guy was or what he was really looking for, but I'm sure of one thing. I'll never work at a night shift at that place again. Working the night shift at Advanced Auto Parts can be mind-numbing. Between 11 p.m. and 6 a.m., there's hardly any traffic. Most people aren't looking for car parts in the dead of night unless they are in a real bind. But then there are the rare customers who stood up at odd hours, and one night I met someone who still gave me nightmares. It was around 2 a.m., and I was halfway through stocking brake pads when I heard the front door slide open. The ding of the door sensor echoed through the empty store, and I looked up, surprised to see anyone coming in that late. A man had stepped in, tall, lanky, wearing a dirty, oversized hoodie and jeans that looked like it hadn't been washed in weeks. His face was hidden under the shadow of his hood, and the first thing I noticed was how unnaturally still he was. He didn't look around or even seem to care about the store. He just stood there, staring straight ahead at the counter. And I said, "Need some help?" I called out from where I was standing. He didn't answer. He just turned his head slowly in my direction. I couldn't see his face clearly, but something about the way he moved sent a shiver down my spine. It was like almost robotic, stiff, like his joints were rusted. But I put down the box I was holding and walked toward him, trying to stay professional even though every instinct told me something was off. "What are you looking for?" I asked when I got closer. He finally moved, but instead of walking through the aisles like a normal customer, he just shuffled toward the counter. As he got closer, I got a better look at him, and I noticed something strange. His clothes were stained with what looked like oil, but the stains were dark and smeared in odd patterns, almost like handprints. His skin was pale, almost gray, and when he reached the counter, he leaned a bit too close for comfort. "I need a special part," he said, his voice low and raspy, like he hadn't spoken in days. "What kind of part?" I asked, keeping my tone natural. He didn't respond right away. Instead, he reached out into his pocket and pulled out something small and, metal. When he placed it on the counter, I had to look at it and gasp. It was an old spark plug, but it was unlike anything I'd seen before. It was corded and covered with what looked like dried blood. I couldn't help but stare at it, wondering where it came from, and more importantly, why he was carrying it around. "This one's broken," he mumbled, almost to himself. I need one that works. One that can bring things back. I was completely thrown off the way he spoke. It was like he was more interested in talking to the spark plug than to me. Trying to keep things professional, I told him we had spark plugs in aisle 3 and pointed in that direction. But he didn't move. He just stood there, still leaning over the counter, staring at me. What I need isn't on your shelves, he whispered, but barely audible, now more of a breathe than actual words. I need the part that wakes them up. That's when I started to get really uncomfortable. There was a heaviness in the air, like something dark was pressing me. I tried to keep calm and asked, What do you mean by that? He tilted his head to the side, as if considering whether or not to tell me. Then he leaned in even closer, his face partially visible under the hood. His skin looked almost sickly, with dark veins running across his temples. And then he smiled, revealing teeth that were chipped and yellowed, like he smoked 3 packs a day. Sometimes they don't stay dead, he said with a hint of glee in his voice. But you can make them move again if you have the right parts. I felt a chill run down my spine, like freaking Sonic the Hedgehog. The way he said it was like he wasn't talking about cars at all. Like he was talking about people. I wanted to get him out of the store as fast as I possibly can. So I stepped back and tried to be polite. Sorry, man, but we don't carry anything like that here. Maybe try another store. For a moment, he just stared at me. His smile faded into a blank expression. Then, without another word, he snatched the corded spark plug off the counter, stuffed it back in his pocket, and turned to leave. As he walked away, I noticed his shoes dragging across the floor, leaving faint smears of the dark liquid with each step. Before he even entered the door, he just reached in his pocket and grabbed a gun and pointed at me. I put my hands up and I said, What the hell is wrong with you? Then he looked at me and said, You don't have the parts I needed, so now you gotta get the consequence. Now I was really uncomfortable and scared, knowing what he was doing. I grabbed the shotgun underneath the shelf under me at the counter, and I pointed it at him. And then he went in aisle 3 to look for the part, which was really weird because I figured he would have left. So that's when I quietly went to the back of the store and I called the cops. The cops arrived, and the man was arrested that night. After the man went in the cop car, the cop came to me, and he said, You are so lucky you called us, and you're lucky you kept them in the store. And then I told the cop, Why is that? He told me, We've been looking for this man for months. And that sent shivers more down my spine, even faster. This man that was in our store was charged with attempted kidnapping, rape, sexual assault, etc. I'm not really comfortable sharing what else he was charged with, even though I just shared a lot. I tell the officers thank you for solving this issue. And as he was leaving the store with the cops, there was like dried red liquid on his shoes, which I assumed was blood. So I just cleaned that up and then got the store back to normal. I quit the night shift not long after that. You get all kinds of strange people at that hour, but some of them feel like they come from somewhere much darker. I never worked a night shift then. This still gives me nightmares to this day.